Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Let's Be Honest with Peter Kozodoy. As a reminder, this is the live stream show I made specifically for the launch of my book, Honest to Greatness, How Today's Greatest Leaders Use Brutal Honesty to Achieve Massive Success. My guest today is an incredible entrepreneur and trainer. And when you say the word sales expert, Matthew Pollard should come to mind. And Matthew, hold up that book again. I love that you have a copy too. Amazing. Matthew's on the Honest to Greatness bandwagon. I love it. So Matthew, I'm just going to make sure that Facebook's live streaming here. Here we go. And we're good. So in 3 to 4 minutes, tell everyone about you, who you are, what you do, what fires you up.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so for me, one of the biggest things that I love to see is, amazing individuals that have got, great functional skills and enough passion and belief in themselves to start their own business. And the problem that I find, or I hate to see, is that they end up, in this constant hamster wheel to find interested prospects, set themselves apart and make the sale, all while feeling like the customer only cares about one thing, price. And to be honest with you, it's got nothing to do with anything else outside the fact that they're so focused on their functional skill and they haven't differentiated themselves. They're not speaking to a niche, so they're speaking to everyone, which is speaking to no one. And they don't have a strong sales system, something that's structured to work. And, especially for me, one of the things that I'm well known for is I built 5 multi-million-dollar businesses from the ground up in everything from telecommunications right through to nationally accredited education. And then when I came to the US, I started teaching people about how to create rapid growth businesses. And I started teaching people these 3 concepts and saying, you don't need to learn more about your functional skill. You clearly are passionate about that. You've got that great ideology. But the problem is that people see you just as a commodity. And because of that, they see you the same as milk, right? They don't see the difference between your version or your brand of milk. And we need to fix that. So I help people understand, utilizing a thing I call a unified message, which is, me calling myself the rapid growth guy, understanding how to niche down where they can start with a smaller group and then build out. That people think that if they pick a niche, they have to stay in that niche forever, which is just not true. But what happened was I started to then share my personal story about being horribly introverted, bad acne, reading speed of a 6th grader, just that real struggle, when I was younger, and how I learned to sell by watching YouTube videos after I lost my job before Christmas and had no real option. And then I'd go into this story about how you can create sales as a system. And what I realized is so many people were coming up to me saying, Matt, your story was inspirational to me. And, I thought it was because of the whole presentation, which they did like. But a lot of introverts were coming up going, I had no idea as an introvert sales was even possible for me. Mm-hmm. So I started to tell sales leaders that somebody should write a book on introverted selling. And I didn't want to write it. I mean, I had a reading speed of a 6th grader. The last thing I wanted to do is write a book on selling. However, I managed to work with this ghostwriter who I took from like $12,000 to, $120,000. I mean, he came to me in October, so it was in 4 months. And then, just shy of $300,000 the following year. And he's like, Matt, you've got to turn this into a book. And I'm like, I don't want to create a book. But eventually it got to the point where it was embarrassing for me to keep saying somebody needs to, and for me not to. So we actually created the Introvert's Edge to Selling, and we launched it in 2018. And, it sold 35,000 copies, 25,000 in the first year. It's won so many awards, and it's led to, which I found, amazing. It's led to people like Zig Ziglar's son, Tom Ziglar, talking about how Zig Ziglar was an introvert, Jeb Blunt talking about his introversion. All of a sudden now, all these amazing sales leaders, which we thought had natural abilities, and now saying I'm an introvert too. And, so that launched the Introvert's Edge podcast. And now the new book that's coming out in January, The Introvert's Edge to Networking, which is the next frontier, if you like, to helping introverts realize they're not second-class citizens. Their path to success is just different. And if we embrace that, it's okay.
What I love about that is something I talk about in my book over and over, that when you're willing to be honest about who you are and capitalize on that, you can put everything into what I call honest alignment, right? It's like, this is something you knew about yourself, but that was sort of like you said, it's clear you thought about it as, I must be a second-class citizen because of this thing. Actually, that was the way forward for you to have even more success, sell 35,000 copies. I mean, that's amazing. Impact thousands of people. I mean, that's incredible. So you got to be proud of yourself for that.
I'm ecstatic that it's been able to help so many people confront this stigma, because it really is. I mean, it's funny, but people are uncomfortable to talk about the fact that they're introverted, because that then puts them in this box where everybody should feel sorry for them because they're just the introvert. I think Susan Cain brought out a great book, called Quiet. And that was great. It allowed, I think it really created this marketplace of, people that felt, that they could be introverts, but they missed the part where she was a negotiator and heard the part that if they want to be a coder, if they want to be a writer, they should embrace those jobs and not be disappointed. Those people are needed. But the truth is, that doesn't mean we can't sell. It doesn't mean we can't network. I mean, I'm listed as one of the top 50 speakers in the world, by Top Sales World magazine. Big Speak lists me as one of the top 10. Ivan Meisner is the founder of BNI, the largest networking group in the world. And he and I are great friends. I mean, he's an introvert. The truth is, the founder of billion-dollar brand Ugg Boots, the sheepskin boot company, he is an introvert. I interview all these guys on the Introvert's Edge podcast. I should say guys and girls, but we interview all of them, these titans of industry. And the difference is that these people didn't see their introversion as an Achilles heel. You're right, they embraced who they were. They're very happy to talk about it openly and honestly. And as a matter of fact, they asked this question at the end: what is your introvert's edge? And they openly talk about how their introversion led to their success. The problem is we see introversion as an Achilles heel. So because of that, a lot of us are embarrassed to talk about it. And that means that the other introverts that look at these successful other introverts project extroversion on them, and we can't seem to get past that wall we've created for ourselves. So I think the biggest thing that I'm proud of is that I think we've started to bring down that wall and help successful introverts feel comfortable talking about it, and inspiring introverts to realize that they really can be titans of industries, titans in their careers, and lead the life that they want.
I love that. It's so important to embrace, just like everyone has their own gifts. Introversion is a gift. I was on a podcast the other day talking about the pandemic. I said, what a gift. Yes, there's a bunch of horrible stuff going on, but what a gift. And guess what? Is that true? Well, it is if we believe it.
Absolutely.
Right? It's all back to what we believe. So, Matthew, looking back on your career, all the companies you've done, all the people you've coached and helped, bring us to a time when you had to get brutally honest with yourself. What happened? What happened next?
I think that, there's a couple of little incidents where that has happened. And I think the most recent one is that when I look at the last 10 years of my life, my backstory is I built 5 multi-million-dollar businesses from the ground up. But the truth is they were all bricks and mortar, telemarketing, direct sales, face-to-face selling stuff. By the way, if I had hit COVID and not had this horrible thing happen and the learning from it, then I would not be making more money now than before COVID, right? I would have been obliterated probably by this. So, it's funny. One of the things I love to say is the adversities in our life tend to see the success of our futures. And it's interesting. So for me, when I moved to the US, so my backstory is in 2013, I decided that I'd worked 80 hours a week for as long as I can remember. And I wanted to take a year to really find myself, travel a little bit. And, I was also looking for a new place to set up, because in my world, offline world, to sell to a bigger economy, I had to move to a country with a bigger economy. Most people probably realizing I'm not really from America. I'm from Australia. The accent gives it away.
Shocking.
Yeah, there you go. There we go. I know people were wondering, maybe he's from North Texas, but no, I'm from Australia. So I thought if I wanted to sell to more than 23 million people, I had to go to a country that had more than 22 million. So I get to the US and I'm like, okay, this is the country. I feel like, this is the place I want to grow. I tried South America. I tried Europe. I love speaking English. I'm good at it. I decided that was a key success factor. Linguistics is a big thing for me. So I went, okay, America is the right fit. Then every good story has a girl, right? I'm married now to an American, but originally when I first landed, I wanted to come on my terms. So I looked for a visa that allowed me to do that. But realistically, I then had this realization. If I'm going to start a business here and it grows to 50 staff, what happens if my family gets sick and I need to go back to Australia on, short notice? So for me, this confrontation, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I kind of thought online was a bit of a joke. And, I thought that all these people were talking about shiny objects. When I got here, I went, okay, I can't believe that anymore. I have to reprogram. Like for me, when I first learned to sell, I had to make the decision that sales was a system, because as an introvert, there was no other option. I had to do the same with this and say, okay, online has to work. And I started synthesizing everything I knew about online with offline. And I started to realize that, a lot of the systems, are good, but the reason why everyone talks about blogging every day and, taking photos of your donut on social media because they don't have great messaging, they don't speak to a niche, and they don't have a great automated sales system. And the truth is that just like when somebody goes to a networking event and they're terrible explaining what they do for 2.5 minutes, but somebody sits there politely and listens, well, online is much harder because they're not going to be polite for 2.5 minutes. They're going to click off. But I started to realize that everything that worked in the offline world actually worked better in the online world. So for me, the reason I had to take a tough look at myself is, gosh, for 10 years, I didn't even think it was important to collect people's email addresses. I just didn't connect with them on LinkedIn. We didn't do the social things. Gosh, we could have made so much more money. And the truth is that it would have been so easy. We did all the hard stuff, but none of the easy stuff because it was foreign. And I think that's usual for all of us. And I think people watching it, that are stuck in COVID right now, all of a sudden the normal's not working anymore. So it's a great time to embrace the things that perhaps aren't so normal, but the things that will actually make your life better. I think Peter's just said, what a wonderful thing COVID can be. I mean, Abraham Lincoln said, if I'm given 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Everyone's just been given 4 hours to sharpen the axe. It's up to them whether they do that or whether they spend some more time watching Netflix, catching up on that show they won't remember in 6 months' time.
I could not agree more. And one of the things that strikes me is when you look back, I think you said a couple of really great wins you've had, Matthew, over the years and inflection points. Is there another one you would say, this is my biggest win, whether it's personal, business, family?
It's funny. So, I'll talk about a win that actually has a lot of relevance to people. So one of the things I find is people tend to inherit their goals from their mother, their father, I don't know, drunk roommate they had in college. We just hear these things like, yes, that's what I want. We charge after it, but we don't really think it through. So 100%. An introverted guy, reading speed of a 6th grader. Everyone looked at me like I was the dumb kid. And then thanks to this pair of glasses, I was the slightly smarter kid that had funny glasses and bad acne, right? So I was always trying to convince the world that I meant something. And, because I lost my job and I ended up in real estate, I went from real estate to commission-only sales, and I was the guy doing data entry. But, it was 93 doors before my first sale, but I learned to sell watching YouTube videos, and I became the #1 salesperson in about 6 weeks. And, it was the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. I then got promoted 7 times. I then went out and started my own business. And in 2007, I won the Young Achiever Award for the business that I created, selling telecommunications, which ended up being the largest brokership in the country for business-to-business cell phones. Going home, which should have been the happiest day of my life. And yet I remember being absolutely miserable, because if that's what success looks like, they could keep it, right? I'd created success to prove everybody else wrong, but I hadn't made myself happy. So I think one of the things that I learned from that is, I really can create rapid growth out of anything. You apply differentiation, niche marketing, and sales systemization to a business model with a great functional skill, a great product, or a great service, you really can create rapid growth out of anything. But there is nothing worse than a rapid growth business, or career, mind you, with customers you don't like in a business you can't stand.
Amen. I talk about that literally in chapter 4 of my book, that it's very easy to trick yourself into going off in a direction that you think means success, when in fact it does not mean success at all. And I think what's important is that we have those awakenings and make change. Unlike having an awakening and then just sort of sitting there helpless and hopeless and whatever. So what about a biggest loss or a biggest regret that you'd like to share?
Biggest regret. I mean, I think, I kind of spoke to it before. I think the biggest regret I have is that I didn't see the point in going online earlier. I mean, for me, each one of my businesses, grew to multi-million dollars within a couple of years. But I never embraced online. I never carried that success from one to the other, right? My personal brand only became a thing when I moved here and decided I wanted to be one. I could have had a personal brand the whole way through. Why didn't I? And I think that the biggest thing is that I think a lot of people, especially introverts, they're scared to be an identity, right? They're scared to have their face on things. They think that being an identity means that they need to be on social media all the time. One of the things that I became, because I never wanted to be that person, I automate everything I do. I share a ton of free videos on how to grow your business on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm listed by Evan Carmichael as one of the most retweeted business coaches on Twitter. I'm never on Twitter. It's all automated. But
yeah.
the truth is that I learned how to do that. I think what happens is people say, okay, if I'm going to be an identity, then I need to do all these things the world's telling me to do. You've got to realize you can do it on your terms. And I think
100%.
For me, if I can say the biggest regret that I ever had was trying to fit into everyone else's molds of success, trying to fit into everyone else's molds for creating income. And as soon as I realized that I could do it in the way that I felt most comfortable, I started making more money. And I wish I did that much sooner.
Yeah. And I look around sometimes at some of the things going on here in the United States. And I think to myself, there's so much freedom. There's so much opportunity. And yet there's so much complaining. And I wish more people would just be honest about like the opportunities we have that we can just go out and get. And it really is that simple. You learned how to sell on YouTube, right?
Well, we can dial that back for a second, because my first day, literally I lost my job, and it was the only job I could get just before Christmas was commission only sales. And I remember getting 5 days product training and getting thrown on Sydney Road, Melbourne, Australia. And it was 93 doors of rejection. Like, I remember going into my first door and going, oh my God, I don't even know what to say. And luckily that guy politely told me to leave. But the next one less politely told me to leave. The next one swore at me. And the next one told me to get my real job. That was always my favorite. But yes, this is what happened. After my 93rd door where I made my first sale, I remember being ecstatic. I made about $70. And then I had this second realization for the day. I'm going to do this again tomorrow. And that wasn't okay. So I then did what a lot of people don't do, I think, because what people do is then go into fight or flight, right? The hustling mentality in entrepreneurship is great and horrible at the same time, because, I'm just going to grind it out. I'm an introvert. I don't have the gift of gab, so I just have to rely on lady luck. So sometimes it's $150 before a sale. Other times it's 31. Maybe I'll pick up the phone. Maybe I'll do social media. Or I just give up. And giving up has two forms. One is I just sit at my office and hope the inbox fills up. No, it won't. And eventually I go broke, or I quit now. Either way, not great. For me, I took a step back and said, okay, if I'm going to be okay with this, and if I couldn't quit because my father would have killed me, and I was young. I was scared of my father back then, and probably still am now. But,
I am too. I don't even know your father. I'm afraid of him.
It's not based on any logic. It's just the kid thing, right? But then you also have the fight thing. For me, that hustle of every day was not going to be okay either. But I said, well, take responsibility, Matt, and then ask yourself, what if? What if there was another way? Well, if there was another way, sales would have to be a system. Bang, then it's a system in my head. Cool. Well, how would I go about learning that? Well, I got a reading speed of a 6th grader, so I'm not exactly picking up a Brian Tracy or a Zig Ziglar book. Well, this was before podcasts and audible learning and things like that. Well, what about YouTube? There's a lot more on there than just cat videos. And now there's a lot more, because I put a ton of free content out there as well. So I learned that sales was a system, and every day I got better. Now, if you look at that, when I got here, well, by saying online has to work for me, I said, well, if online's got to work, it's got to be a system. Well, these are all the things that I don't want it to do, so I need to systemize all that stuff out. And then now I'm one of the top 30 global gurus in the world of sales and marketing. My book does amazingly well, but everything's virtual. I remember going outside to promote my book, and sales went down, not up, because now, I can leverage myself so much more. And, while Peter, you're a personal friend, so of course I did this. When a lot of people reach out to me, I'm trying to help as many people as possible. And sometimes that means only going on shows that have thousands of listeners and, lots of people, because there's only a certain amount of time. Right. But again, my interviews, these stories that, while hopefully they come across as organic in this conversation, as an introvert, of course, I've prepared remarks. Now, I don't sit down and practice them beforehand like I used to, because I have lots of them, and I've done, I think this would be close to my 200th interview. But it's all a system. And because of that, again, don't be restricted. And I think the biggest thing, and you can call it American problems, the biggest Australian problems, the biggest first world problems that we have, is things aren't painful enough anymore. Like, if everything goes wrong, we're still going to eat and have a place to sleep, which, let's face it, we're all living like kings and queens compared to what it was 150 years ago. The trouble is, we don't make things uncomfortable enough for ourselves anymore. But we do, because then we end up getting depressed and hate ourselves, and that's worse in my mind. The problem is that none of us, change that. A few of us do, but most of us never live up to our full potential because it wasn't uncomfortable enough to try. And I don't see why it should be miserable for us to want to become who we're meant to be.
You're 1,000% right. I say it all the time. We are not uncomfortable enough to make real changes. It's easy for us to sit and complain about everything because, like you said, we live like kings compared to, even hundreds of years ago. Humans have been on the planet for thousands of years. So yeah, I think we lose perspective in that. And I want the big takeaway for everyone listening to this to be that, in my estimation, what you did was take personal responsibility, which is something else that I think we've lost as a society. And it's really sad. So Matthew, tell everyone where they can find out more about you and follow along.
Absolutely. I mean, you can type my name into Google and I think I take up the first few pages, but MatthewPollard.com is my website address, but check me out on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me, say hello. You're welcome to, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I provide a ton of free videos there. So many people try and hire somebody before they even, take advantage of their free content. You're likely probably never going to need to work with me. There's enough there. I learned on YouTube, remember? And then the other thing that I would suggest, if you are an introvert, you should check out the Introvert's Edge podcast or check out the Introvert's Edge book. By the way, my publisher hates me when I say this. You don't need to buy my book. I always suggest that people download the first chapter. I'm so focused on having that passion and mission base in my business that the first chapter, I literally get you over that psychological issue that you can sell. And then I map out the 7-step process to selling. And if you do nothing more than grab those 7 steps, look at what you currently say and try and fit it into that, you'll realize there's a bunch of things you say either out of order or things that don't fit. Those things that don't fit, throw them out. You shouldn't be saying them to clients. Then you'll realize there's a bunch of gaping holes, fill those in, and you'll double your sales in the next 60 days. And you can download that book at theintrovertsedge.com. And depending on when you listen to this, you'll be able to get my next book or the first chapter of that, The Introvert's Edge to Networking, as well.
Love that. Huge, huge value. Thank you on behalf of everyone for sharing all of that stuff. Listen, for me, the theme that weaves through all these conversations, of course, is honesty, right? If Matthew doesn't get honest with himself about his strengths and his weaknesses, they will look at everything he's built on top of that honesty. If that interests you, if you feel like you could use honesty in your life as a strategy to achieve results, go pick up your copy of Honest to Greatness. It certainly would make me feel a whole lot better that the world is getting a whole lot more honest. So Matthew, thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on.
It is absolutely mine. And until next time, I'm Peter Kozodoy. Thanks for being honest.